Good morning. Happy Friday. We're coming into a restorative practice today. And you should have a bolster if you own one, a couple blankets, a couple blocks, and eye pillow if you like to use one for savasana or pranayama, and a strap. And because these are now recorded classes, I'm going to try to include what props we're going to be using in the beginning so that if you are watching a recording, you can pause and go get what you need. And you can, if you're doing it live, you can also get what you need. So let's take a moment to just center ourselves in a seated position, finding your less favored crossing of your legs, and just taking some time to settle into the foundation of this pose, anchoring into your sitting bones, giving yourself whatever support you need, and then attempting to put yourself in good alignment with the shoulders above the hips, the chest lifted and spread, and feeling the spine lengthening, but without losing the connection you're making with the floor or with your props. Also lifting the spine without the knees following. So keep your knees kind of descending toward the floor. And once you find all of those things, let the hands meet in front of the heart, keeping your shoulders back. Closing your eyes and pointing the gaze away from the brain. This restorative practice is really about the brain. Deferring to the heart, letting our brains become more passive, more receptive, becoming more conscious and getting a little distance from engaging with the thought waves that the brain creates. You just start to turn your attention inwards, just observing various aspects of just being here as a physical body, as an emotional body, as a breathing body. Just giving yourself some time to connect in a way that's just very objective. Maybe deciding upon some certain direction for this class today, some certain wish or intention. Maybe just inviting the heart space to become a bit more open without having to name an intention. And see if you can keep your chest lifted and spread as you bow toward your heart. Let your hands release down, and as you're ready, lift your head. Let your eyes gently come open. And welcome. So we're going to begin in Urdhva Hashimotonasana, reclining bound angle pose, just to prepare the body for this practice. And so you can use your bolster either horizontally for a more lifted and spread chest experience, or you might use the bolster vertically. And if you don't have a bolster, you can create one by rolling up a blanket or two blankets together. And you can play with the bolster as far as if you're using a vertical bolster, you might angle it or put it at an incline so that the head is higher. Or you might just add an additional blanket to create a little bit more height for your head. And we're going to take the feet and bring them together and connect with a strap. We're going to use a strap today. So you can make a loop with your strap. And just pass it over the torso and down to your hips. And take the loop right under the toes. And then just cinch off any excess strap so that you have a nice snug feeling. And then you're going to want to pay attention to your legs so that we can give the legs as much support as they need. The inner thighs, the hips might be not quite ready for this big open pose. So you want to tuck something under the knees or hips so that you can just release, become very passive in your legs. And either way you're using the bolster, you're going to want to keep some space between the end of the bolster and your tailbone so that the lower back is just kind of long and that the bolster is mostly supporting the lift and spread of the chest. And be on the backs of your hands. This pose is really wonderful because once we set it up, it really just keeps working on us and we don't really have to keep working on it. So just feeling the effects of gravity, how with each passing breath, the body surrenders just a tiny amount more. And maybe detecting those, I call them default tensions, the tensions we carry kind of below the line of awareness. Tensions the body has kind of been trained to hold on to. So some of these areas, these usual suspects, are the abdomen, especially the lower abdomen. There's a certain curling up that happens in the chest and shoulders that we can just simply let go of here. We all carry a certain amount of tension in the face. Some of us in the jaw and inside the mouth. And of course, the roots of the groins, of course, the hips. So continue to, breath by breath, just kind of set those tensions down. I'm going to read to you a poem I really like to kind of set the stage for our class today by John O'Donohue, his book, To Bless the Space Between Us, a book of blessings. This one is a blessing for presence. Awaken to the mystery of being here and enter the quiet immensity of your own presence. Have joy and peace in the temple of your senses. Receive encouragement when new frontiers beckon. Respond to the call of your gift and the courage to follow its path. Let the flame of anger free you of all falsity. May warmth of heart keep your presence aflame. May anxiety never linger about you. May your outer dignity mirror an inner dignity of soul. Take time to celebrate the quiet miracles that seek no attention. Be consoled in the secret symmetry of your soul. May you experience each day as a sacred gift woven around the heart of wonder. Now gently help your feet come out of the strap. And then you'll help your feet step wide and let your knees come together and let your hands just kind of soften on top of the belly. Taking a few moments to hold the counter pose, to let the hips come back in, the groins come out of that deep extension. And of course, just kind of noticing what follows Not just that pose, but every pose we do. And just reminding you here that as we transition through a series of poses, to protect this kind of sense of inner quietude that we're cultivating throughout this practice. We are going to be transitioning to a head-supported downward dog, and I want to offer those of you that struggle in downward dog for any reason to take a head-supported standing forward bend Uttanasana with a couple blocks under your head. If you're able to support a longer downward facing dog, reminder here that you can come into child's pose at any time to rest and then come back into downward facing dog. So if you're going to do the downward facing dog with head support, you can use block, you can use a bolster, any amount of height on top of the bolster, such as a blanket or two additional. Sometimes we even need to include a block in there. So really just build it up to meet you so that you don't have to distort the pose to get your head in contact. And if you're using a 2-block setup, Uttanasana, you might stack 1 block vertically, 1 horizontally. You might need 2 vertical blocks. So again, you just have to figure out what amount of height you need to build up so that the top of the head for both of these poses is supported. Placement for the bolster for or setup for downward dog is just kind of right under the face as you're doing your table pose. And then as you feel ready, you'll come into your dog pose. And you might notice you want to widen the distance between, or lengthen, I should say, it's actually lengthen, between the feet and the wrists. Feel free to do that. What we don't want to do is bend elbows. What we don't want to do is kind of move the hips forward to meet that bolster or setup. So hopefully you found your way into one of those poses. And as we hold a certain amount of effort in our poses, we're really inviting the brain to take on that kind of passive witness seat. You can guide your attention gently to your breath. Each breath is an invitation to draw in something new and to let something go with the out breath. We'll stay another minute. So like I said earlier, if you need to break out into a child's pose, make sure you're listening to yourself and staying with your own needs throughout your practice. Keep widening the backs of your knees, drawing your heels down. We'll be coming out shortly. We'll just spend another 5 breaths, really focused on the breath, deepening your breaths. If you're lucky enough to hear your breathing, looking for that smoothness, like there's a leak in a bike valve. We're going to be coming into child's pose. So if you're in Uttanasana, make your way there. If you're in downward dog, you can just drop the knees. Feel free to use your setup for head support or torso support, otherwise coming all the way down to the floor. Drawing your hips back, extending the arms forward. Spreading and broadening the back body. And keeping the head angled slightly with the hairline against the floor, the chin kind of tucked into the chest. Just inviting the fronts of the ankles to open here. Some of us suffer with arch problems in our feet. And this pose is really supportive to the arches of your feet. So we're going to be gently transitioning onto our front body. So you can make your way there. And we're going to take a kind of a brain quieting version of Sphinx pose. So just begin by rolling the inner thighs up and the outer thighs down and spacing your feet hip distance apart. And we're going to step the elbows forward and place your hands in Namaskar Asana, which is the prayer position. And then taking your forehead against the thumbs. And bring a little action into this position. You can kind of fall into it and get passive, but kind of drag the elbows back toward you so that you can move the tailbone in and move the shoulder blades in. And make sure your head placement is keeping the back of the neck long. Keep moving the tailbone into the floor, lifting the inner thighs, drawing your small toes down. Keeping a sense of length to the lumbar spine by driving the tailbone deeper into the earth. And with your eyes closed, looking away from the brain toward the cheeks. You keep kind of dragging the elbows toward you, moving the shoulder blades in. And allow your belly to really push against the floor as you breathe in to help you open the spine more. We're going to release the arms, create a little pillow out of your arms and rest one of your cheeks. Bend your knees and just sweep the legs back and forth slowly, removing any tension that accumulated in your lower back. We're going to come into Parivrtta Padangusthasana, but we're going to come in through a different door. So I'm going to have everybody roll on to their left side from this Sphinx pose. And before we get too far along, find your strap and find either one of your blankets or your bolster. I'm going to put a blanket because it's less crowding for the camera lens. So you're going to put the blanket in front of you. You're on your left side. And with your strap, you're going to just take hold of your top leg ankle, which is your right leg. I've created a mess with my strap here, so I'm going to try to untangle. But you're going to take hold of your right ankle with the strap. Just kind of make a loop around it. So you have a hold on that ankle. Yep. And now with your left hand, grab the ankle and guide the right foot to the blanket. And encourage the foot to be higher toward the shoulder line. You'll notice it's going to try to creep away. So that's why you have the straps. You can kind of hold on. And now just drape your right hand over your side waist. And start to roll your right shoulder back to the floor. And eventually you might unfold the right arm completely out to the side. Sometimes the shoulder isn't ready for that big opening right away, which is why we drape the hand over the side waist. But we're essentially trying to roll the right side body back toward the floor. And eventually you might complete the twist by letting your head completely roll to the right as well. And because we're in restorative yoga, you might just kind of be passive with your bottom leg. In a different class, we're really kind of using that leg to anchor. But today you might just play with a bent knee a little bit, a heavy passive leg. Be on this side another minute. Just kind of keep your attention pricked a little bit. Watch the body, watch if that foot is sliding or creeping away. Maybe it's a better pose if you activate your bottom leg. It's all about keeping the brain present. So if your mind is wandering, you might start to play with various aspects of the pose so that you can maintain a sense of presence. I named this week, Moving at the Speed of Presence, which is really an art. And we can use this practice to kind of develop that art. And 5 more breaths. Give those next 5 breaths your complete, undivided attention. And now allowing your top leg to bend and just very intuitively deconstruct the pose. You want to come out of twist always very carefully because we do go so deep in our twists that you want to move gently and with awareness, not just springing out of a pose that you held for so long and so deeply. Come back onto your back for a couple moments and just kind of reset the pelvis. So sometimes in twists, there's a little disruption, there's a little rotation. They'll just kind of bring us a sense of evenness of the sacrum against the floor. Moving with awareness. Good. Once you feel kind of like you've acknowledged any counter effects or after effects, then you're going to transition over to the other side. And you're going to lie down on your right hip side. Again, the blanket should be in front of you so you can see it. And with the last side, I kind of noticed that I was sliding on my blanket because I have this slippery wood floor. So I'm actually going to eliminate the blanket. It is nice to have support though for the foot. So if you are using a prop and you're sliding, you might throw a sticky mat pad under it so that you're not dealing with that slipping effect. We're going to take hold of that top ankle, left ankle, with the right hand. And just sweep the leg out onto the prop. Drape your left hand over your side body until you're aware of what the shoulder can tolerate. Don't assume you're going to go into the full pose right away. Just start very mildly and build off of that. And now encouraging the left side body to descend toward the floor, including the shoulder, including the side ribs. You might start by taking your gaze up to the ceiling. Eventually, you're going to roll the head to the left. And eventually, you might unfold the left arm completely perpendicular from the torso. Bottom leg is passive. Turn your attention to the quality of your breath. Watching for any rippling in the breath, which is a sign of strain or stress. Attempting to let a little more breath out than you might otherwise when you're not thinking about your breathing. Noticing how the out breath encourages the deeper rotation of the spine. Maybe guiding some of that breath into your top hip, outer hip. Maybe noticing a corresponding sense of freedom as we eliminate physical tension from the body. These tensions in the body that directly influence how we feel, our perspective, our brains. And again, the next 5 breaths, just devote your full attention to. And when you come to the end of the next exhalation, again, very gently and slowly with awareness, deconstruct that big twist. Bend the top leg knee. Help the strap come away from the foot. Bring your lower back evenly onto the floor. And take a few moments pausing here to reset the pelvis, to notice any effects from that big twist in your body. And then help yourself gently to either side. We're going to come into Hashimotonasana, and this is a optional chair pose. Because I do want you to have your forehead grounded in this seated forward bend. So if you kind of can anticipate that your head connecting with your legs through any amount or arrangement of props isn't going to happen, you could put a chair over your legs, maybe something soft on the chair seat, and you're going to be crossing your arms and just kind of resting your head on the edge of the chair seat. But everybody should take a little bit of height under their sitting bones so that your lower back is really in a very upright position. And I usually take the blanket right to the edges of my sitting bones. I don't have any blanket in front of the sitting bones. So the blanket's acting like a wedge, and then helping the flesh of the buttocks away from the sitting bones. So you feel very anchored. You feel broader also. And then building up any amount of height or placing that chair so that you have a really good chance of connecting your forehead. And remember, you also have your fists as props. So you can additionally add the height of 2 fists stacked up. Okay, so once you kind of get the height you need, take a moment to sit up tall in Dandasana. Because what we don't want in a forward bend is a slumping, kind of sluggish feeling in the spine. So imprinting here with the spaciousness of the front body, spaciousness between your rib cage and your pelvis. And then hinging forward, lead with your breastbone, keep your trunk extended, and then prop your forehead. Energetically, think about the heels moving toward the femur heads. You might, in contrast, notice the heels want to push forward. So see if energetically you can draw the heels toward the femur heads, which propels the torso forward. So there's a wave of energy here from the heels to the sitting bones, all the way over the trunk to the head. Each inhale, a chance to bring the breastbone forward and the shoulders back. And pay attention to what is needful in your body. As you hold a pose, you might need to adjust your propping down. Envision the volume of breath inside the rib cage, and not only the movement of breath vertically or horizontally, but the full circumferential kind of experience of breath, as if it originates from the stem of the spine and just expands out in all directions. And just place yourself in a little boat and be a passenger in your little boat on the next 5 waves of your breath. When you finish the next exhalation, start by just lifting your head, look forward. Inhale, lift yourself up. Again, always coming out with as much grace as you come in. And then helping yourself out of the pose, putting the props aside. Shift forward. And we're going to take a very mild, you might do this on the fists. Tisha, maybe Louise. Watch your wrists. You might do it on the fingertips. Kind of depends what your wrists are needing these days. If you don't have wrist issues, you can just prop your hands down with the fingers pointed back. So your feet are out in front of you. Your hands are behind you. You're going to roll your shoulders back, angle your gaze up, and just spend a little time here in this pretty mild back bend, just countering Hashimotonasana. Bringing a sense of equanimity to the spine. Lengthen through the top of the head. And still be on your sitting bones. Keeping the lower back long or even concave. Good. And now help yourself sit forward. We're going to set up for a series of reclining forward bends. And actually the first one's not a forward bend, but my favorite prop for this series is a bolster. But you can also use a couple rolled blankets or a block if you're really short on those softer props. A block, if you're using one, and a blanket over it would be a nice way to pad the block so it's not so edgy, because it's going to be against the lower back and we're going to be putting a little more pressure than we normally do. So if you have a block, maybe throw a blanket over it. So we're going to be sitting on that prop, and if you're using a block, sometimes it's easier to slide the block under you once you're already reclining. But if you're on the bolster, it's a little harder to shove that big bolster under you or blankets from reclining. So it's best to come down by sitting on it first and then kind of helping yourself down. So first is supported bridge pose. So just put your shins in vertical alignment. You don't need to squeeze the heels close to the sitting bones today. And keep your feet hip distance, toes in front of heels. And then just draw the arms out like you're in Shavasana. Bring as much of the shoulders down on the floor as you can and lift your shoulder blades toward your chest. Try to snuggle your chin in toward your chest. And pressing the lower back into your prop, bring the tailbone into the body toward the ceiling. Bring a certain amount of effort into your feet. And as you do so, see if you can allow your buttocks to soften a little bit. You might close your eyes. So the art really is to keep the lower back long, the posterior pelvic tilt, but without sinking the chest. And these unions of opposites are so engaging to the brain. It's what really does help the brain become quiet. It's like giving the brain a bone, giving the dog a bone, something to do with all that extra energy in the brain. As you strike this balance or work to strike this balance, the brain is satisfied. And we're absorbed in what we're doing, and we're present. Now, after holding the effort, just kind of relax and become passive. Like you've squeezed a fist for a certain amount of time and now you're just releasing the fist. You might feel a flush of energy. And now we'll come into supine, child's pose, of course with the hips elevated, which gives us a little bit of a playful experience with gravity. So draw your feet in. Draw your thighs in, lifting the feet one at a time from the floor. And let gravity kind of drop the thighs toward the chest. And then extend your arms overhead. And with each exhale, just allowing those thighs to release closer to your torso. Keep your chin angled toward your chest. We're going to come into Urdhva Hashimotonasana. So we did seated Hashimotonasana. Now we're doing upward facing. So extend your legs. And again, gravity helps those legs come closer to the torso. Don't worry about your legs being perfectly straight. Attempt to keep the lower sacrum toward the prop that you're using to elevate, even though it wants to peel away. And continue to angle your chin toward your chest. Spending 5 more breaths. If it's a helpful image, you're that passenger in that small boat riding the waves of your own breath. Finish up. Next exhale, and then help your knees bend. And you're going to step the feet one at a time back to the floor. And be back in bridge pose, which is a very passive, mild back bend that will help relieve those 2 deeper forward bends because gravity really kind of brought some depth there. So Shavasana arms, be passive here. You might even take feet wide and let knees angle in toward each other, which brings a sense of broadness across the lower back and brings a sense of broadness across the lower abdomen. Okay. So help yourself. You can move toward your head side. You can move toward your foot side or carefully roll off. But just remember you're on some height. If you have a block, you could just slide it away. So carefully come off of the height. Shift to your side. And come up. We're going to set up for cross bolsters, which of course I know most people don't own 2 bolsters, let alone 1 bolster, but we can get by with what we have. I want us to include a little bit of restraint with the feet today. It's actually going to be the ankles, because in this pose our feet tend to want to just go wider and wider. So we're going to make a loop with the strap that when you place it, your feet should be slightly wider than your hips, but we're going to be ensured that they won't go any wider than that. So you can play with your band a little bit so that you can see when your ankles are in your strap, those ankles are just slightly wider than your hips. Okay, and you can play with it and adjust it if you need to. We'll take that off for now as we set up the cross bolsters, which is going to be an X shape on your mat. And the bottom part of the X is the horizontal piece. The top part you want running with the spine. So if you don't own bolsters or you own only one, the second bolster or both can be made with a rolled blanket. And I do like to usually put something down for my head and shoulders just for a little bit of padding, especially if you're not on carpet at home, just a little bit more comfortable. So you'll have your setup like the X shape, 2 bolsters or 2 blankets or 1 of each, something for your head and shoulders. And then of course you'll start sitting on top of that kind of pile, putting your ankles inside the loop you've made. And then when you come down, you really want to get the shoulders and head on the same height, which is that blanket hopefully you've set up. And then we're going to stretch the legs out with the toes pointing up. And you'll know if you've set yourself up for success or failure. Your body will tell you right away, this is not a happy place, or this is too mild, this is boring, my brain's going to be wandering. So first few moments, just pay attention. If your legs can't straighten, you might have too much height underneath you, or you might need to elevate the heels with blocks. So I think it might be Sarah I'm looking at, but yeah, I think you might want to elevate or lower the cross bolster. You can do either. We want to find the Jalandhara Bandha, which is the chin lock. So hopefully your chin is snuggled into your chest. You might need to adjust so that your shoulders come down more. If your chin and chest aren't meeting, usually the floating shoulder is kind of the culprit. So make sure to slide toward the head side to get the shoulders fully down. And do your best to keep the legs really in good alignment. So not only fully extended, but toes above heels, vertical soles of your feet, kneecaps facing up, inner thighs rolling down. Take the tailbone toward the ceiling. And you might engage the heels down into the floor to help you bring the tailbone up. Chest is lifted and spread. Gaze is away from the brain, which is a really quick way to tell the brain it's not in charge. It's more passive in the kind of in the back seat. I had a teacher once who said the brain is like the drunk girl in the back seat, which is not completely nice thing to say, but it's kind of funny. So give your brain a chance to ride in the back seat. Holding a certain amount of effort, but also just very peaceful, very still, very present. As you roll your inner thighs down, slightly raise the pinkies of your hands. And just another minute. And now letting go of that fist. Each pose is like a fist. Letting go of those very specific contractions. Slide your feet out of your strap. Place your feet wide, angle the knees together, and just fold the hands onto the chest or belly. The last thing we're going to do is slide toward your head side so that your butt is down off of the height. Cross your ankles or bound your feet, bound angle. Crossed ankles or bound angle. Unfold the arms. Your feet should be on the height. So make sure your feet are elevated. And if you're crossing ankles, after 5 or 6 breaths, change the crossing of the ankles. If you haven't done so already and your ankles are crossed, make sure to switch so that you have kind of a balanced experience. We're going to be easing off of the height. So if it helps to bring the knees together first and then step down, do that. Otherwise, roll to either side. And we're going to set up for pranayama practice. I like to use blankets rather than bolster because they're more flat and they're skinnier. And we really just want to support the spine mostly in pranayama. So you can get by with one blanket, but if you have two, it's better. And you'll open your blanket up so it's kind of the opened up rectangle. So it's nice and big, and you're going to be try folding it the lengthwise way. And you're going to do that twice. And rather than stacking directly, you're going to stagger so that we have a lower portion for the lower back, and then a little bit more height for the rib cage, and then the top part, I call it the snail. You'll just kind of curl it so that it's a big old amount of height for the head. We want the Jalandhara Bandha for pranayama. We want the chin snuggled into the chest. And then you'll have to Goldilocks it for your own proportions. Some of us have a very short lumbar, some of us have a long lumbar. So the measurement is really customized to your proportions. Your butt will be on the ground. The first tier of the blanket setup will be just covering the lumbar spine, lower back. The second tier, the thoracic, the rib cage. And then of course, the head and cervical spine kind of gets that most amount so we can connect chin and chest. So pranayama is a little bit like shavasana as far as you want to be comfortable. You want to have eye support if your eyes don't like to close on their own or stay closed. If you're cold, you'll want to cover your body so that you're not thinking about you being cold the whole time. And once you're lying down, just take a moment to lift the buttock flesh away from the floor and also draw it away from the head side. So think about the flesh of your buttocks descending from upper to lower buttocks. And that also takes care of lengthening the lumbar. So it's a good action to do once you're there, to lift and lengthen away from the head, lengthen the lumbar, flesh of the buttocks is pulled away from the head side. The feet are separated hip distance. And the arms unfold like you're in shavasana so that you can invite shoulders down, you can invite the chest to lift. We're going to begin in Ujjayi 1, which is just us getting a baseline on our breath. So we're not actually doing any yama, which is restraint, to the prana, which is the energy. We're just observing. And there's no judgment. If you don't like your breath, excuse that thought. If you're very proud of your breath, excuse that thought. Just notice. Sometimes it's best to just do Ujjayi 1. Either the practice of asana wasn't robust enough, we're not ready, or just breath awareness is enough for some days. But if your Ujjayi 1 is feeling good, it's feeling like a healthy version of your breath, you might decide to practice some of the techniques. And today I'm offering Viloma. And we're going to do Viloma 1, which is interrupting the in-breath. Before we do it, there's a couple things to just know about the breathing. There's no prescribed amount of pausing as you inhale. You're going to take pauses every few moments with your inhale, and the pauses should be about 2 seconds. And with those pauses, you're immobilizing the diaphragm, which doesn't mean you're hardening. It's kind of a little bit of a restraint with the diaphragm, but not a gripping or hardening. So it's very subtle. And when you breathe in again from the pause, you're not going to loosen the diaphragm. So we very much have control over the diaphragm for these interruptions and for the full inhale. When you exhale, you're going to Ujjayi exhale. So you're going to apply what you know about Ujjayi, where you tighten or constrict the muscle in the back of the throat, and you let a very smooth and even and long breath out. And then you're going to take a normal cycle or 2 or 3. You really have to listen to what you need. And then you'll repeat as long as you're not agitated, as long as your breath isn't getting away from you. So the pranayama practice just takes us deeper into presence. You really have to stick with where you are and abide. So as you're ready, we'll take a normal inhale and Ujjayi exhale out. And from the end of the Ujjayi exhale out, you can begin to kind of play with the pausing, immobilizing the diaphragm, taking another sip of breath in without loosening the diaphragm. Pause, sip in. And when the lungs are full, Ujjayi exhale out. Easy breath cycles. You determine how many you need before making another attempt. When we focus on inhale, there's a tendency for eyeballs to roll up. I really want you to look toward your cheeks as you're doing Viloma inhale. Look away from the brain. When you're ready to try again, make sure you start from a deep Ujjayi exhale out. An image you can use for this pranayama practice is like you're climbing a very tall ladder. Those rungs of the ladder are the pauses. And we'll just give it another round if you're still with it. You can prepare or take another round. When you conclude the attempts on Viloma 1, just sit with your automatic breathing for a few moments, observing any effects. When we emphasize inhale, it's more energizing practice. we're feeling sluggish, it's a great way to bring a more sattvic state. Sluggish is kind of a tamasic state. Sattvic is balanced. Rajasic is a little bit amped up. In which case, if that's the feeling, you're going to want to practice the Loma 2. Extending exhalation, which we'll do for another day. And now you're going to try to quietly transition to lying flat on your back for the last couple of minutes in Shavasana. And transition in a way that's just not jarring the senses, not overly effortful. A poem from Hafiz, a Sufi poet. When all is still, and then all the and thens ceased. Nothing remains to be done in the order of time when all is still. In the profound quiet, the immaculate comes into view. God disrobes. You're always free to stay in Shavasana since you're at home. If you have nowhere to go, you might stay. Otherwise, you'll begin to invite deeper breaths and small movement. Eventually letting it carry you to one side. And then eventually letting it bring you up to seated pose. And once you're seated, just take a moment to sit quietly with yourself, just acknowledging the effects of your practice. Just like when we begin to practice, we center ourselves and we prepare to conclude a practice, we just take a moment to notice what the after effects are. Let's take a deep breath in through the nose and let it go. From the place within me that I know to be divine, I honor that place within each of you. Namaste. Right. And thank you all for being here. I hope you have a beautiful weekend. And we'll see you soon. We still have a few more days left of this month. So next few days, Monday and Wednesday, will be a variety class. So, all right. Bye, everyone.